Ellie's birthday party, my granddaughter, was held at home. The living room was filled with pale pink balloons. A vanilla cake sat in the center of the table, its sweet scent spreading through the room. Everyone laughed, clinked glasses, showed off pictures, chatted like I wasn't sitting at the far end of the table, like I hadn't brought a single one of them into this world. No one asked me to come closer, no one pulled me into the frame. When the cake was brought out, Dan Manley's husband clapped a little too loudly, like he was trying to force the room to feel festive. Then he said something not loud, but just enough for the air to shift. No need to save her a piece. The old lady paid for everything. Lucky she even remembers what day it is. Laughter dropped to the floor like shattered glass. I didn't react, I just looked at him, long enough that the mood in the room turned. Then I laughed a dry, quiet laugh that sent a chill. Oh, I remember every face in this room. No one said a word. No one dared make eye contact. That night after the party ended, they searched the house for me. I was gone. They figured I must have taken a cab home. No one texted. No one called. The next morning, Manley got a message from a small mountain hospital over 3 hours outside the city. Your mother had a minor accident. She's showing signs of temporary memory loss, but she hasn't forgotten one thing: she doesn't want anyone to come get her. I'm a retired philosophy teacher, lived my whole life alone, independent, never needing much from anyone. The family stays in touch out of obligation, except for Ellie, the youngest. She's the only one who still hugs me with both arms tight. Manley, my daughter, started pulling away after she married Dan. I knew something was off the first time I met him. Too smooth, said just the right things, behaved just well enough for everyone to call him a good guy. But his eyes were completely empty. Dan controlled everything: the money, the house, even the way Manley spoke at dinner parties. But I said nothing. I had no proof, just a feeling. The kind of instinct old women like me collect after decades of watching people. Last year, I used the excuse of wanting to be closer to my granddaughter to sell my old apartment and move into a small house a few blocks from Manley's. But the truth was, I wanted to watch, and I didn't have to wait long. One time, Ellie came home wearing the dress I gave her for her birthday. She loved it, twirled around, showing it off, couldn't stop smiling. But later that afternoon, Manley called me, voice tense. Mom, please don't let her wear that again. Dan says it doesn't look right. And could you not give her things without asking us? First, I didn't answer, but that night Ellie came to sleep over. She tucked the dress under her pillow and whispered, Dad says your stuff is old-fashioned, but I think it's pretty. A few weeks later, I slipped in the bathroom. Nothing serious, just a few scrapes. The next day, while I stood at the stairs, I overheard Dan in the kitchen. Just put her in a nursing home. She's a hassle here. Plus, selling that house could save us a ton. I froze. My hand gripped the cold wooden railing. He had no idea I heard. That's when I knew this wasn't just neglect. This was a plan. From that day on, I started remembering everything. Not in a notebook, but in my gut through instinct and the observational skills of someone who once taught philosophy, including the art of subtle manipulation. Every glance, every tiny detail, even the strange silences in that house that no longer felt like a home. Every Sunday, Manley's family hosted dinner. I was rarely invited, only when someone else couldn't make it. That day, one of Dan's friends canceled at the last minute, so I was allowed to take the empty seat. The evening played out pleasantly on the surface. Dan told jokes. Manley nodded like everything was fine. But I knew too well the way people laugh to cover things up. The quick side glances, the half-second pauses before a punchline, all signs. I turned to Ellie, my only joy at that table. You still have the doll I gave you, don't you? I asked casually, almost in passing. Ellie was eating. She froze. Then she glanced at her father, lowered her head and whispered, as if afraid someone might hear. Dad said, I can't play with it anymore. He said, it belongs to someone who's about to go crazy. I went still. The spoon slipped from my hand, landing softly on the plate. Ellie thought I hadn't heard, so she added, he said, your brain is breaking. That I should play with new toys instead. Manley said nothing. She kept eating like nothing had happened. Maybe she heard, or maybe she chose not to. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I tried to keep my voice even. I placed my hand gently on Ellie's. It's okay, sweetheart. Someone really is losing their mind. but it's not me. That night I sat in the living room staring at the doll box on the shelf, the gift I bought with the last of my retirement check. And now she didn't even dare to touch it. Dan didn't just look down on me. He was quietly redefining who I was in Ellie's eyes, bit by bit, silently and cruelly. I was never one to interfere in other people's business, but being a mother, sometimes instinct makes you stop in your tracks. That day, I stopped by to give Ellie a few old books, the kind we used to read together late at night. The front door was slightly ajar. Out of habit, I stepped in quietly. I didn't want to disturb anyone. Just then, I heard Dan's voice coming from his office, low but clear. Yeah, if she's really starting to lose her memory, that actually works out perfectly. I froze. My heart started pounding. Remember, she signed a temporary power of attorney over Manley during treatment. If we get a statement declaring her mentally incompetent, we can take full control. The court won't question it. I felt paralyzed. Cold crept over my entire body. Dan paused for a moment, then continued, I've been talking to a doctor I know. All we need is a signed note, just temporary memory loss. Could be a few months. Could be permanent. Who knows? I backed away slowly, one hand gripping the wooden hallway panel to keep myself from collapsing. It wasn't just a gut feeling anymore. It was the truth. Dan was planning to take everything, every bit of the savings I'd spent a lifetime building, the same assets I had temporarily signed, over to Manley after my fall, under one condition: they'd be returned once I recovered. I used to think I had time to undo it. But now I know I'm being hunted. And maybe my daughter, the one who used to call me the whole sky of her childhood, was the one who handed Dan the key to unlock this door. Or worse, she opened it herself. I taught philosophy for over 30 years, but the deepest lesson came not from books, but from the silence of my own house. After the shock of overhearing Dan's call, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. He didn't just want my money, he wanted to erase my dignity, one document, one forged signature at a time. So I began to disappear. Legally, I was still there, but publicly, I started to fade. I took down the security cameras, saying the lights gave me headaches. I hired Janet, an old friend and former psychiatric nurse, as my private caregiver. This was my final role. 3 weeks later, Dan thought he had won. He started visiting, often bringing fake paperwork, pressuring me to sign a new power of attorney. I pretended to doze off after taking the medication he gave me. Janet, the quiet, unassuming nurse, recorded everything with a hidden camera sewn into her blouse. Footage of him unlocking the safe with my fingerprint. Footage of him telling Manley, just sign it. It's for your mom's protection. I still don't know if Manley was fooled or if she knew and signed it anyway. But to me, this was no longer betrayal. It was a crime. I didn't just resist, I was building a case. Dan didn't know this game wasn't his to finish. Then I sent out the invitation's farewell party, beginning a new journey to the southern coast, hoped to share one last hug. Manley called. Her voice was low. Are you sure? Mom Manley's voice was barely above a whisper. I just smiled. This time I'm really leaving. No need for anyone to worry about me anymore. I prepared the house as if it were Christmas-scented candles, a fresh tablecloth, a full spread of food. Dan arrived late carrying a bottle of cheap wine, laughing loudly. I invited everyone to eat. Ellie sat beside me, quiet. I served her a piece of roasted chicken breast, her favorite. Just after everyone raised their glasses for the first toast, I stood and gently tapped my glass. I don't have much, just one small gift, a few honest memories. Please enjoy. I pressed a button. The projector lit up the wall with a soft glow. Family photos appeared, me holding baby Manley Ellie grinning in the bathtub. Soft music played in the background. Everyone was relaxed. And then Dan's voice pierced through the calm. She's just a walking wallet, a live-in ATM. The sooner she loses it, the better. Every head turned toward him. His face went pale. Next came footage of him secretly opening the safe, pressing my hand to the fingerprint sensor while I dozed in the chair. Then another scene, him shoving paperwork at Manley, his tone forceful. Just sign it. You're saving your mom. Finally, a slightly shaky clip filmed by Ellie on her iPad from upstairs. Dan shouting directly into my face, "I don't need you teaching my kid anything." "You're a failure." The room went silent, utterly still. Dan jumped up, lunging for the projector. I stayed seated calmly, lifting my glass of water. "I didn't record these," I said clearly. "I only kept what others chose to do. One by one. No one was forced." Manley trembled. No one spoke. Ellie looked down, then gently squeezed my hand. I stood, reached into my bag, and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table. "This is everything I have left. I've removed my name from it, all houses' accounts, even the deed to the old apartment. I'm not keeping anything. What remains, I'm leaving to someone who truly deserves it." I looked around, not for answers, but so they could see the eyes of someone who had finally understood. Then I turned to Ellie. She was watching me, eyes glistening. She didn't need to say a word, because it was Ellie who had given me that final clip, along with a question so innocent it broke my heart. "Were you sad?" "When Dad yelled at you like that, I didn't answer. I just kissed her forehead." The next day, she quietly handed me her iPad and said, "If you ever forget later, I think you should have this." She hadn't meant to hurt anyone, but it was that very innocence that shattered an entire grown-up world. 3 days after the family dinner, I sent Dan a short message. "Final meeting to make things clear. Sable and Vine, 7 p.m. I picked the most upscale restaurant in the city, not for the atmosphere, but because no one dares to raise their voice there." Dan arrived late as usual, shirt, wrinkled tie askew. He slouched into the chair with a crooked smile and wary eyes. "Is there really anything left to say?" I sat across from him, fingertips resting on my glass of water. All around him, people subtly nodded at me. Janet, the nurse. Miriam, my closest friend from university, now a legal advisor. And Kenneth, a financial crimes attorney who once co-taught my ethics seminar. Dan looked around and felt it. The air had changed. "What the hell is this?" I met his gaze, really met it for the first time. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean and sharp. "You didn't just insult me. You misjudged the woman who spent 30 years teaching philosophy and ethics to thousands of students. You thought I was just some senile old woman, easy to trick, easy to forget, easy to write off." I pulled a small USB drive from my jacket pocket and set it gently on the table. "This contains copies of every recording, every audio file, every statement, and the full access logs from the safe's fingerprint system. I've backed it up in 3 places. One of them is already on its way to the Department of Justice." Dan shot up from his seat, voice tight with rage. "What do you want?" I smiled softly. "I don't want anything. I'm not suing. I'm not asking for the assets back. I just want the truth to be put in its rightful place, and if the law sees fit to investigate, well, they know where to find you." He looked around the room, seeing that everyone remained calm. Kenneth, the lawyer, opened his laptop and began typing. Dan slammed his hand on the table. "Damn it! You think you can destroy me with a bunch of stupid videos I didn't respond." Instead, I pulled a small slip of paper from my shirt pocket, a note handwritten by Ellie in her shaky, slanted script. "Grandma, if you forget, I'll remind you. You're not confused. You just chose not to speak." Dan read the words, and for the first time, he had nothing to say. He stormed out, and just as he stepped through the door, his phone buzzed. This time it wasn't me saying goodbye, it was the law. I had thought I was just a mother being manipulated by her son-in-law, but it turns out I had uncovered a system. A week after Dan fled our final meeting, Miriam, my friend, now a senior legal advisor, came to visit. Her face was grave. She placed a thick folder on the table. "It's not just you," she said quietly. "We found 3 more cases, same pattern. Private care homes, sudden memory loss, temporary asset transfers." I opened the file. Everything was familiar. The cognitive decline forms the power of attorney templates, the same legal loopholes Dan had exploited. But the victim this time was Mrs. Wilson, a retired librarian, 82 years old, no children, no guardian. I looked up at Miriam. "So," she nodded, "they're collecting them, one by one, built on silence and forgotten memories. That very night I gathered everything, all the footage, document copies. and my 3 months of observation logs. I submitted them to the Department of Justice, along with a second copy sent anonymously to an address in Washington, D.C. 3 days later, an anonymous expose appeared on the front page of the New York Times, exploiting forgetfulness, a hidden crime in the heart of America. My name wasn't mentioned, but the story was all there, every clip, every detail, every image. A web of private nursing homes was now under federal investigation. A special committee had been formed. Dan was just one small link in a far bigger chain. This time I didn't have to speak. Society spoke for me. I left the city on a Tuesday morning. No flowers, no goodbyes. Just the sound of a long-distance bus and my hands gripping an old fabric bag. I took nothing but a few changes of clothes, some books, and a small box. The rest, including the house near Ellie's favorite elementary school, had been transferred into a private scholarship fund in her name. I left nothing to Dan or Manley, and I didn't ask for an apology. I simply severed all legal ties with Dan permanently. A few weeks later, Manley received a letter. My handwriting familiar, steady. It was short, just one line. Sometimes to protect your child, a mother must sacrifice even the image of herself. I don't know if my daughter fully understood. I'm not sure she wanted to. But I knew this I did what needed to be done. Somewhere in her room, Ellie opened the small box I had left for her. No gold, no savings books, just a worn sketch pad frayed at the corners with a scrawled line on the first page. Let memory serve the truth. Never let the truth be twisted by memory. Ellie ran her fingers gently over the page. Her small hand paused at one of the drawings. I had done a sketch of the two of us sitting under the eaves, coloring the sun together. She said nothing, but her eyes, I believed they understood. I thought everything ended when I left, but it didn't. 1 month later, the court issued an official announcement. A broad investigation had been opened into a pattern of suspicious power of attorney filings, and Dan's name appeared most frequently among medical-related asset transfers. Those once considered silent victims began filing complaints. An 89-year-old widow in Vermont, a former veteran living alone in Oregon. Each had been labeled mildly cognitively impaired, same forms, same trusted doctors. This time Dan couldn't run. He tried to fight back, filing a countersuit against me, and Ellie claiming we had damaged his reputation and caused emotional harm to a minor in the family. Kenneth, our lawyer, simply shrugged. He submitted a full access log of Dan's bank activity from the previous year, along with footage of Dan secretly withdrawing funds from my savings account even while I was hospitalized. When the judge asked how Dan had obtained my security code, he went silent. At the same time, Ellie, according to the new terms of the will, was declared the sole heir. But the child wrote a letter to the Scholarship Foundation in her own hand. I don't need my grandma's money, but I want her dream to make sure no child ever has to learn how to stay silent to keep going. The Colleen Scholarship Fund was established dedicated to students whose grandparents lived in nursing homes or had no family caretakers. And at the final hearing, when Dan tried to interrupt the attorney, the judge calmly said, "You weren't deceived. You just assumed old people don't fight back." This time, no one needed to shout, because the truth spoke for itself. About a month after I left, an old friend sent me a link to an article. The headline stood out on the front page of a national children's magazine. My grandma wasn't confused, she just chose not to speak. It took me a few seconds to recognize the familiar slanted handwriting in the attached photo. It was Ellie's letter. In it, she wrote about the grandma who once taught me to color the sun using two colors, because the sun is never just one shade. About our whispered stories before bed, the doll she wasn't allowed to play with, and the way adults would say she's old. Don't listen to her. Only this time, Ellie didn't stay silent. The article went viral not because it was scandalous, but because it was real. Families with grandparents quietly tucked away, labeled as burdens, shared it with a simple message they haven't forgotten. They've just stopped speaking. A month later, Ellie was invited to speak at a TEDx youth event. She stepped onto the stage with her old iPad, the same one she used to record Dan yelling at me, and said older people don't need us to rescue them. They just need to be heard with our hearts, not with pity. In the audience, many adults bowed their heads. I watched from a seaside cafe through the soft blur of the screen. No one recognized me, no one needed to. Just the golden afternoon sunlight streaming through the window and the voice of a 12-year-old girl rising clear and warm. Grandma, if you're watching this, I still have your sketchbook. And I still remember how to color the sun. I don't know how long I'll live here on the southern coast. Maybe a few years, maybe just a few months. But at least I no longer have to pretend to forget, no longer have to close my eyes to dishonesty. And after everything that's happened, I don't need anyone to call me right. I just need to leave with the truth still intact in my hands. 3 weeks after the farewell dinner, Ellie moved in with me. No explanation, no official papers, or goodbye letters. The court temporarily revoked Manley's guardianship during the investigation. The reason involvement in asset misappropriation through forged documents. Short, clinical, emotionless, much like the way Ellie had once been told not to play with her grandma's doll. That evening, Manley came. She stood outside the gate for nearly 10 minutes. Didn't knock, didn't text, just stood there like she was waiting for rain so she'd have an excuse to leave. I opened the door, didn't ask, didn't invite her in. She stepped inside, glancing around the familiar home, like someone waking from a long sleep, her hands clenched pale white. "Mom," she began, her voice hoarse like something had her by the throat. I knew Dan wasn't kind a long time ago, but I couldn't say anything. I was scared. I looked at her. I didn't react. I was scared you'd never forgive me, scared you'd be disappointed, scared I'd lose everything. So I pretended not to see. I gave a small, joyless smile. You didn't lose everything. You just lost the one thing worth keeping, your self-respect. Manley lowered her head. She couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't console her, didn't place a hand on her shoulder. I just said quietly, forgiveness isn't a privilege, it's a choice. But to be worthy of it, you have to be brave enough to face your wrongs without running from them. She left soon after, didn't look back. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I just felt light, like I'd finally put down a weight that was never mine to carry. If one day you realize that your own family is slowly erasing your voice and image from memory, would you stay silent just to keep the peace? Or would you fight to reclaim the truth even if it meant losing your name?